I wanted to segue the conversation a little bit into a training strategy. We talked about training just kind of superficially. We were referencing your seemingly meteoric rise over the last year, even though you've been chipping away very steadily. When you structure your training, like just kind of foundationally throughout the year, how do you kind of organize it long term? What type of things do you focus on? And what do you feel like contributed to 2019, 2020, where you did kind of have that breakaway moment?
Sure. So I think because for the most part, we talk about programming. I've always done it for myself. There's one year where I had Terry Rady coach me for about 6, 7 months. And he did my programming, but I was able to get a lot of missing pieces from Terry's programming and add it to my own train of thought. So I went that going forward. So, but I generally like 3-week blocks of different things, and getting closer to the competition, I would like to get more event focus, and then those accessory movements are very focused on the actual event. So, for instance, we were talking about the squatting per se. I would like to, of course, I like to do the big the event squat and then follow up with a leg press. So I really destroying my legs, but I'm almost like bulletproof, and so even if there's still, I can still have energy or still get more power exertion out during after the actual competition. I can kind of fish that on the leg press. So there's always kind of like a finisher. So even on deadlifting, I would have like 13-inch pulls after to really again pull, so I could really pull from the bigger position. But I would say that even going into the prep and I ended up getting hurt. I think this time around I was too gun ho given the year I just had. I should have just figured out that, and I thought I was toning it back, but I didn't tone it back just enough. I should have taken more time off and really kind of assess what I needed going forward. Almost too, I was almost kind of like striving for perfection. So I kind of drove myself mad. So what I ended up doing was I started doing 2 big blocks before I started a 12-week block. So I essentially did like an 18 or more week training block going into Clash, and I ended up kind of breaking down the last kind of 5 weeks or so. So if I could do it back, I would have started right at the 12 weeks, and would try to ramp up, which was similar to what I did last year, just because I was forced to last year because I was coming off an injury. So very starting out, I would have started like almost like 50, 60% in that first block and start kind of like ramping up. And then I don't like for instance, that Clash was an interesting contest just because it had 10 events. So I was never, just because I had so many events and so many implements, I wasn't going to train to competition weight. So my goal on the squat was to work up to something like 570 for a lot of reps. I think originally we were going to have a 675 deadlift, and I wasn't going to go as high as 650. So I generally would like to kind of work more towards bulletproofing and having some extra volume rather than actually hitting certain weights. When we did ASM last year, I thought I was kind of also working on building up my deadlift when I was working towards the log record. But I knew that if I could hit, let's just say like 700 for one set of like 4 or 5, I would be in a good position to pull close to 8, and that was kind of my goal. I want to hit that volume. I didn't really need to go to like 740 or 750 to feel the weight in my hands before that max pull. I know that I would have been able to get that prior if I put the work in terms of less weight. So I'm not a proponent of doing competition weight, depending on which type of implement, but I really would like kind of like at least just standard like linear periodization leading up. But I think what I've again during that run, I started doing more deload weeks. So 3 weeks on deload, 3 weeks on deload, and as much as I can. But some of the preps are sometimes are not even ideal. So like for instance, when I went to Russia, it was like a 3-week prep. In between the log record and ASM, it was like a 2-week prep. But I've already touched some of the events prior, but it was really like a 2-week intensive prep. OSG, I think I overtrained for that, but I originally did 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and then competed. So of course, a lot of things, I threw a lot of those things in that answer, but
No, that's great.
pretty much, I always try to figure out what the competition has hand, because my goal is to win the contest, not necessarily hit certain weights. What I lack in, and then I'll always try to work the best events, or work my worst events the most, so I can become that well-rounded individual. So like, let's just say for even this clash, I toned down my pressing. Who Like, I used to press twice a day or twice a week. I turned down once a week, and that press day was like a on my worst day, like after a big heavy lift, just because I don't really need to be better at pressing. I know I can beat everybody in my pressing. I get the other events. So actually, keg throwing was like going to be my big surprise this year. I probably threw like 12 different days leading up to this clash prep. I really wanted to just like see if I could just, I wanted to win that keg throw. That was like my goal going into Clash, and then they ended up having the keg throw, so I wouldn't be able to show everybody that. But that's something, again, I was training the weakness is super important, but that's something I really wanted to show everybody.
The bulletproofing comment really resonates. It reminds me of like what Ed Cohn would talk about as far as like creating a suit of armor. He talked about doing all the accessory to make this suit of armor that would make him resilient, and it reinforces his lifts. So it sounds like you take, instead of doing what a lot of people I think do, which is hyper specialized, hyper focus, like, oh, it's a 700 deadlift for reps. I'm going to do that 12 weeks out. I just want to see what I can do. And then every workout is contest, contest, contest. Sounds like you're taking a very kind of outside in approach, like using a lot of other things to kind of prop up that event, that performance. And which I like. I mean, it took so many years to realize just in myself all the weaknesses that develop when you just do contest prep and nothing else, and then you end up with these big glaring weaknesses that limit progress. And the pressing one time per week. That's so I used to get Scott Brengel screaming in my ear about being a one-trick pony, because overhead is the first thing I was ever good at, because I have tiny little arms and it doesn't have to go very far. And I remember the hit to my ego when I had to drop pressing to a lower frequency to accommodate other work for things I was shitty at. It was like the hardest thing. This is my favorite thing to do. It's what I was the best at. And I would say even over the last, I would say my best pressing was probably 4 or 5 years ago, when I was like a much worse strongman, but I was a much better presser. I mean, I take the bar out, it'd be floating up by my nose. You know, it's like I had all this tightness, compression. But and that speaks to what you have to do. So that's interesting to hear that you intentionally put that on the back burner. It's like,
So you adapt to what you need to become the best self to win that contest. So whatever you need to adapt, that's kind of what you got to do.
exactly. It's not wishful thinking. It's not, I like doing this, so let me just keep doing that. It's problem solving. It's, I'm deficient here. That's the basket I have to put all my eggs in. I'm curious about kind of as a general training principle, because you mentioned kind of like a broad linear periodization approach, which I'm a big fan of. I do a very kind of broadly like intuitive, just start light, ramp volume up, and then get heavier and start to take volume away. Do you have any like kind of hard fast rules or rules of thumb as far as like how hard do you work in any given set? Like how often you push it, if you push it at all? Do you ever take sets to failure, or do kind of limit testing sets, or do you really avoid that?
So on the peak week, so on the last week of the block, so this if it's a 3 week block on that last week, for instance, on like a deadlift or a squat or a press, I would do maybe like a kind of a 2 sets to get going, and then that third set I call it a competition set. So you're almost mimicking like getting ready like you're doing it in the competition. So that it could be like let's just say it could be the third set of 6 on strict pressing, but that set of 6 is going to be the fastest, is going to be the strongest, and you're going to be confident to hit it. And sometimes it might be, I might do 2 extra reps or something like that. But on that peak week, I will treat that one of those big sets. I'll make a big set to treat it as like a competition set.
That makes sense. I'm a big fan of doing like an AMRAP or something at the end of all your working sets. I mean, you get the benefit of like getting deep into that threshold while also getting the volume, but it seems to mimic strongman pretty well. Like pulling out the AMRAP when you're already a little fatigued. Like you're not, it's not your first set. You're not quite fresh. And I feel like that does a lot to insulate you to the demands of the sport.